conflict that began on June 13, 2025 marked a turning point for Tehran. The destruction of hundreds of missile launches, the targeting of nuclear facilities, and the killing of senior commanders, all these became the beginning of new developments in Iran. In these days, as a second wave of attacks is anticipated, the term strategic patience is no longer being discussed in Iran. It has been replaced by the phrase decisive response. From air defense systems to missile programs, from diplomatic alliances to the mobilization of society, the country is being reorganized from top to bottom. So, what exactly has changed in Iran and how? What preparations are being made for the next war? And how is the possibility of a second round of conflict with Israel perceived? We will examine all these questions under 10 main headings. Before we begin, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. GZT 10 on begins now. I would like to begin with a brief summary of what has happened so far. On the morning of June 13th, the attacks launched by Israel sent shockwaves through Iran. In operations carried out in 5 waves, hundreds of fighter jets took off. Nuclear facilities, missile launchers, and air defense batteries were targeted simultaneously. The toll was heavy. The nuclear facilities in Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan were struck. Hundreds of missile launchers and dozens of air defense systems were disabled. What was even more critical was the loss of Iran's top military leadership. From the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to the chief of general staff, and even the scientists overseeing the nuclear program, many key figures were killed within the first few hours. Throughout the conflict, Iran deployed more than 550 ballistic missiles and thousands of unmanned aerial vehicles. Although a large portion of them were intercepted by the air defense systems of Israel and the United States, it cannot be said that the attacks were completely ineffective. This short but devastating war marked the beginning of a new era in Iran. Tehran realized that it could no longer afford to wait patiently. It had to rebuild and respond more forcefully. At least that is the prevailing sentiment within the country today. The clearest reality this war revealed to Iran was the collapse of its air defense system. Israeli aircraft, through advanced electronic warfare and cyber attacks, managed to disable Iran's radar coverage within a short period. The subsequent waves of strikes then hit nuclear facilities and missile launch sites almost without encountering any significant resistance. In the aftermath, Iranian officials began asking, where was our air defense? Why couldn't we stop the enemy? These questions pointed directly to the fundamental weakness in Tehran's security structure. Although the systems appeared modernized, they lacked sufficient interoperability and distributed command and control mechanisms. When central radars were disabled, most of the batteries were effectively blinded. The problem was not only technical but also deeply rooted in intelligence failures. The fact that Mossad had such an extensive understanding of Iran's defensive layout prior to the attacks exposed the depth of internal security vulnerabilities. Hundreds of individuals were arrested on charges of espionage. In short, the June 13th attacks taught Iran a crucial lesson. Even if you possess hundreds of missiles, without a robust air defense network and a solid security shield, deterrence is impossible. For this reason, in the aftermath of the war, air defense and intelligence security became the central focus of Iran's entire strategic reorganization. Everything I have explained so far is already known to many. I have simply summarized it again to provide a foundation for what I will discuss next. Following the June conflict, a significant shift in perspective has taken place in Iran. Until that point, Iran's guiding principle had been strategic patience. In other words, it focused on long-term calculations, exercised restraint in its responses, and avoided entering a full-scale confrontation. Due to its experience in the war with Iraq, Iran had always sought to avoid total war and preferred to conduct its operations through proxies. However, this strategy has not only failed to produce deterrence, but has now completely collapsed. Israel continued its attack plans with the same confidence. In fact, one could say that Iran's lack of response, or its inability to respond, brought it even closer to the very war it had sought to avoid. After June 13th, the picture changed. Iran realized that limited retaliation was ineffective and adopted the doctrine of decisive response. The message now is clear. If attacked again, the response will not be limited. Economic centers, energy infrastructure, and even US bases in the region could become targets, and in recent weeks, Qatar has been explicitly threatened. One of the main reasons behind this strategic shift is that, during the 12 days of strikes Iran carried out against Israel, the country witnessed the psychological impact and the sense of confidence those successful hits generated. This approach reflects 2 main points. First, Iran is now willing to take greater risks to re-establish deterrence. And second, if a new war breaks out, it is unlikely to remain confined to a brief 12-day confrontation. It could escalate into a broader and far more destructive conflict. In short, the era of strategic patience is over. In domestic discussions, Iranians are saying, we will not make the same mistake a third time. The clearest outcome of the June attacks was the collapse of Iran's air defense system. Israeli aircraft and unmanned systems easily disabled Iran's radar networks. When central command points were struck, the majority of the batteries were left blind. For this reason, Iran's top priority after the war became securing its skies. To fill this gap, Iran activated the Bavar 3732 system. This new generation air defense system, with a 300-kilometer range, high-altitude capability, and independent radar equipment, is far more flexible than its predecessors. It can track dozens of targets simultaneously and intercept several of them at once. Most importantly, it can operate autonomously even if the central radar is destroyed. However, its actual effectiveness against Israel's air power remains a matter of debate. Almost every day, missile trails can be seen in the Iranian skies as the country conducts tests. From time to time, authorities even announce transfers days in advance, closing highways to relocate and fortify their systems. In addition, systems such as Majid and AD-120 have been developed for low and medium altitudes, while the Arman project has been introduced for long-range defense. Iran is now attempting to establish a layered defense architecture, not only to protect Tehran, but also to secure critical areas such as nuclear facilities and energy infrastructure at multiple levels. In short, Iran is modernizing its air defense to avoid being caught off guard in the next war. However, it may have acted somewhat late. Still, there is an unmistakable sense of round-the-clock preparation across the country. Not only launchers but production facilities were targeted in the June 13 strikes. The destruction of critical infrastructure at sites such as Hojir and Parchin created a severe bottleneck in Iran's missile production. The elimination of large industrial mixers used in the solid fuel missile program brought production capacity almost to a standstill. Yet Iran did not retreat in this area. Its priority became restoring production capacity. Thanks to new chemicals and equipment procured from China, monthly output has gradually begun to rise again. The aim is to return to pre-war capacity, meaning hundreds of solid fuel missiles per month. It would not be an exaggeration to say that production now runs on 3 shifts a day. Beyond quantity, Iran is now pursuing quality as well. The Haber-Shekan missile, with its terminal maneuvering capability, was the only system during the June conflict that seriously challenged Israeli defenses, and therefore it has been given priority in renewed production. In addition, new high-precision types such as Qasim Basir and heavy warhead missiles like Hurrem Shah 4 are under development. A more ambitious project is the Rastahiz missile, which is reported to be capable of carrying dual warheads and to have intercontinental range. Although still in the testing phase, Tehran is beginning to establish deterrence beyond Israel's borders with this system. In short, while Iran works to replace the stocks it expended in the war, it is simultaneously strengthening its hand with longer range, more accurate, and more unpredictable missiles. During the June attacks, facilities such as Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan were targeted. They sustained significant damage, but the program was not completely destroyed. Prior to the strikes, Iran was reported to have a stockpile very close to weapon-level material. Today, it is said that Iran has maintained that capacity and is even attempting to expand it. This is why comments suggesting that Iran could reach a nuclear weapon within a few months have resurfaced. However, the issue of nuclear weapons is highly complex and multi-layered. Beyond enrichment, the weaponization phase remains the truly critical point. On the other hand, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, still maintains his fatwa prohibiting nuclear weapons. Yet, in the aftermath of the war, voices calling for the pursuit of nuclear weapons have grown louder both within society and in political circles. In short, Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged but has not collapsed. The question of whether Iran will or could develop nuclear weapons continues to be a real and unresolved puzzle on the international stage. After June, Iran established a stringent internal security architecture. The first step was mass arrests. Tens of thousands were detained, hundreds were tried on espionage charges, and some were swiftly executed. This sent the harshest message that the regime had not lost control domestically. The internet remained shut down for days, and the flow of information was tightly monitored. Social media posts, contact with foreign press, and even corresponding with someone abroad were treated as potential espionage. The state declared information security a direct matter of national security. Another notable measure targeted Afghan migrants. Hundreds of thousands were deported. This action was justified both as a security measure and as a tool to reinforce the regime's dominance over society. Checkpoints were increased across the country, and security perimeters around critical facilities were tightened. Neighborhood inspections, patrols, and screenings for suspicious behavior were reintroduced. Accompanying these measures, a comprehensive propaganda campaign was launched, emphasizing themes of resistance, unity, and combating betrayal. In short, after the attacks, Iran reshaped not only its military defenses, but also the daily life of its society according to wartime conditions. The prevailing view in Iran after the June war is this: a new attack is inevitable. Therefore, as I noted earlier, the strategy has changed. Strategic patience is over and has been replaced by decisive retaliation. This is not merely a military tactic, it sits at the heart of debates within the regime. Parliament Speaker Kalibaf explicitly stated there will be no limited response in the next war. Advisors to Ayatollah Khamenei warned that we are no longer in a ceasefire phase, we are in a war phase. Foreign Minister Araghchi conveyed the same message in diplomatic language. If we are struck again, the response will be unavoidable. This rhetoric has been reflected in military preparations. As I mentioned, missile production capacity is operating day and night, and unmanned aerial vehicles are being restocked. New air defense systems such as the Bavar 3732 have been brought to the fore. Security rings have been established around critical facilities. However, domestic debate continues. The reformist wing argues this approach could plunge the country into further devastation and urges prioritizing diplomacy. The conservative wing counters that such restraint would signal weakness, warning, if we do not strike decisively in the next round, we will not have a third chance. This time the aim is not merely to survive, but to impose a cost so severe that it secures lasting deterrence at the negotiating table. One of the harshest consequences of the June war was Iran realizing it was standing alone. Israel struck, the US entered the field, yet neither Russia nor China became militarily involved. This reality prompted Tehran to rethink its alliance strategy. Voices within Iran that were skeptical of these alliances grew louder, though they soon faded from public debate. Nevertheless, Iranians are acutely aware of their isolation. Years of pursuing a policy of "we run the capitals" have undoubtedly contributed to this sense of solitude. The strategic partnership agreement with Russia was significant. However, Moscow's purely verbal support during the war caused disappointment in Iran. The sale of Su-35 fighter jets to India demonstrated that Iran cannot rely on Russia for security. As a result, Russia is now seen as a pragmatic partner, rather than a security guarantor. The situation with China is different. Beijing is Iran's largest trading partner, and Iran is crucial to China's energy security. The 25-year agreement, infrastructure investments, and technological cooperation have all been accelerated since June. China also serves as Iran's strongest shield at the United Nations. Consequently, Tehran's strategic orientation is increasingly leaning toward Beijing. Regionally, 2 points stand out. First, the cautious rapprochement with Saudi Arabia. During the June war, Riyadh's decision not to close channels with Iran, despite US pressure, represented a critical gain for Tehran. Second, the loss of Syria. The potential collapse of the Assad regime eliminated Iran's land bridge and forward defense line, creating a gap in regional alliances that is difficult to compensate for. This issue continues to be raised and debated in the Iranian press. In the end, Iran now leans on China globally and on dialogues with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan regionally, while keeping Russia at arm's length. A new alliance architecture is being drawn, more cautious, more multidimensional, but also more fragile. Finally, it can be said that this period marks a growing recognition in Iran of Turkey's strategic importance and a rising pursuit of cooperation.
15 октября в Алматы я проведу стратегическую сессию для владельцев бизнеса с оборотом компании от 50 миллионов тенге в месяц. Это рабочая встреча, где мы обсудим типичные ситуации владельцев бизнеса и дадим понимание 3 важных вопросов. Как владельцу выйти из ежедневной операционки, как грамотно подходить к подбору управленцев, как контролировать бизнес через систему показателей. Вы увидите примеры компаний, которые, применяя технологию HR-капитал, вышли из операционного хаоса и смогли существенно увеличить прибыль. Послушайте, что говорят владельцы бизнеса, прошедшие обучение в HR-капитал и внедрившие нашу систему эффективного найма в своей компании.
Это польза для развития бизнеса в Казахстане, для развития экономики, для того, чтобы наши предприниматели становились более грамотными, более успешными, используя лучшие технологии. Это все то, что можно найти в
As I mentioned earlier, all senior Iranian officials are sending a clear message. If we are struck again, the response will be decisive and cannot be contained. There is also a clear expectation regarding timing. Iranian officials see August-October 2025 as the most likely period, while a foreign policy analysis extends this window to August-December 2025. Potential triggers include Iran continuing uranium enrichment, rebuilding its missile arsenal, and the activation of UN sanctions in September 2025. Frankly, I have my own assessment as well. For Israel, the period from September 20th to the end of October is filled with endless holidays, during which streets are largely empty, a window when civilians are more vulnerable to external missile attacks. Indeed, last year, Israel exploited this same period to conduct strikes against Hezbollah. Given that Iran's greatest potential threat is missiles, it is likely to follow a similar approach. Israel also conducted an airstrike exercise in August, and air defense reinforcements are reportedly complete. While the US government shutdown and elections may have an effect, Israel has lost the element of surprise against Iran, which is a critical factor. If a second round of conflict occurs, which I hope will not, and that stability will prevail in the region, it is likely to be far harsher than the first. I should note, however, that as of the filming of this video, no significant military movements have yet been observed. Iran's red lines are clear. The top priority is protection of energy infrastructure, particularly oil facilities, and the strategically vital Asaluye gas complex. Foreign Minister Arakchi issued a stark warning. Attacks of this type could drag the world into war. Other red lines include potential strikes on nuclear facilities, targeting of Supreme Leader Khamenei, and violations of regional sovereignty. Where would Iran strike in response? The target list appears far broader than expected. Parliament Speaker Kalibaf openly stated, targets in the Persian Gulf will be hit, indicating that Iran could, for the first time, directly target Gulf states. Potential targets include the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar and US military installations in Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. Perhaps the most critical threat is the possible closure of the Strait of Hormuz, through which 25% of global oil trade passes. However, for now, these discussions remain internal. How much of it would actually be executed is uncertain. In sum, Iran is signaling that the next conflict would be far more extensive and destructive than the previous one. Iran's post-June 13th strategic transformations, efforts to address deficiencies, and pursuit of new alliances will be among the most critical factors shaping regional balances in the near future. Tehran is working both to close domestic security gaps and to strengthen its deterrence abroad. In this 10-on segment, we have examined the fundamental parameters of this transformation. If you found this video useful, please like